Hello folks, I'm L.A. Little and this is your daily NeoTA wrap. We take a look at these markets and we do it from a neoclassical perspective. Each time we ask ourselves what happened today and what does it tell us about the coming ones. I do this show 4 times a week, Monday through Thursday, broadcast at or before 10 o'clock Eastern Time. Archived on YouTube, it's under the channel L.A. Little. You can catch me there. Of course, you can send questions. I've got a few questions to highlight tonight. You just pop into TATV. There's some information here about how to get questions to us, and I'd be happy to look at anything you want to look at. Looking at the markets, what did they do today? Well, you know, I was telling, I think last night, I said today was probably the best chance for some sort of a pullback. Started out that way, gaps down, but they bought it immediately and never let up. Took it positive, ended up higher. We had a spike up. Actually, the Russell was up about 1%. That's incorrect. This quote system seems to get it wrong every now and then. But the Russell was up big, was the leader. But we were green across the board. The only thing down, copper and the dollar slightly down. Everything else was up, including gold, up 1%. Big moves pretty much everywhere. Oil got a nice rebound, almost 2%. Green across the board. It's beginning to be a one-way street. Well, beginning to be. It is still a one-way street. Maybe that's the best way to say it. Let's look at this market. Let's look at what happened today. Let's consider, what is it telling us? When you should get something and you don't get something, that tells you that the market is either much stronger or much weaker than you expect. We should have got a pullback. This week, in particular today, yesterday and today is the best chance. Didn't happen. They tried, as you saw, markets gapped down, but they couldn't hold it. And if you can't hold a move or you can't do what you should do, and the setup was there, right, both from a counter perspective, and there was no strong indication other than the Russell, but there were some slight indications that, today was a decent chance to try to get one, and you don't get it. In this particular case, sellers, there are no sellers of size. What sellers there were was immediately bought and bang, right back the other way. They take it up to the highs. They're hanging at the highs. And I don't care which index you look at, they all look the same. Right at the highs, right across the board, pushing up, every one of them. NDX, Dow Jones, NASDAQ. The only one that's not at the highs is the Russell, but the Russell actually did a takeaway bar today. It's right back up and over, right? Completely washes out what was there. And most importantly, it held on that second lower retest regen. That was here. It tested it last night, holds it, goes back up. It's right at the top of it now. Is going to try to get back into this higher range again. If it gets up into here and closes here tomorrow, somewhere up here or wherever it is up in this range, it's going to go after that swing point high to break it next week and push on up to the final set of highs that are out there. So the Russell did exactly what it needed to do from a bullish perspective, takeaway bar back to the top side. It's impressive. And there has been, when you look at this market and you look at the kind of move that has been made and you don't see any kind of pullback. I mean, this is the most pullback we've seen, which is roughly, 2-3%. The rest of the market, 0.5% at best and only for a few hours at best. Other than that, it's been all up or sideways. The big story today, in my opinion, was in the socks. Gaps down, holds, reverses, comes back up. It's hanging right here at the tops. It's going to attack those highs most likely tomorrow. And the biggest story inside there was Intel. Intel makes a nice big pop to the top side. And, they were telling us today that this market that they sell into is better than you expect. And I want to show you the power of this Intel move. Let me pull it up so I can look at it on an intraday. Here's the big move. Volume expands, but when I go inside this thing, you can see right off the get-go, right, this is one day, nothing was happening, gap down, and then they came out and said, hey, things are better than we think. So our earnings are going to be better than we think. They did that, if you remember, they did that sometime back. If we pull this back to say 9 months, they did it here, again there, right? Then it came down in September, October, right? Did the test. And what was it testing? It was testing 30, which if you go all the way back on Intel, 30 was the key number. Back down in here. Now this is adjusted for dividends. If you take the adjustments out, 30 was the key number. This thing went right back down to 30, tested it, couldn't break it down. And what does that do? That leads to the reversal. Now you get this news pop over the top, breaking out on all time frames. Intel's going a lot higher, and this SOX is probably going with it. So that's the big story. That's going to keep powering the NASDAQ. And of course, the other piece of all of this is Apple. Apple gets another upgrade today. Says, gets a price bump to 135 from 120, and it just keeps powering higher. And this is such a big piece of so many indexes. And, as long as Apple keeps going up, it's pretty hard for this market to go down. So those are the big stories today, the big pieces that are out there. If I look elsewhere and I go and look at the sectors, sector-wise, this market's doing fine. It's either sideways consolidation, as you can see in these, or rotation to these weaker ones like the XLB and now the XLE, right? So you're getting the rotation coming in, or you're getting the sideways move, or you're just getting extension breakouts like in this consumer discretionary. So sector-wise, there ain't an issue. Index-wise, they've done exactly what they needed to. Russell did exactly what it needed to. The best case probability of some sort of a retrace goes by the wayside. That tells us things are better than we expect, or not better than we expect, but better, stronger, I guess is the word I'm looking for. You're not going to get a retrace. This thing's correcting by time, not price. Economically, there was a lot of data today, and almost all of it was positive. It was weak around the globe, and that showed up in the trades today around the globe, and we'll pull that up and look at it. But domestically, the Philly Fed, huge numbers there. It just blows away the estimates. PMI came in a little bit lighter, but still good. It's 56, I think it was, or something. Numbers were good. If you go over to Asia, Asia struggled, but they actually put in a lower low underneath, right? Up, under, over, a little bit less volume. This thing looks like it's probably going to bounce. If I look at Hong Kong, it looks the same. Gets under, back over, a little bit less volume. That's probably going to try to bounce. If I look at Taiwan, Taiwan's chip country. What's it doing? It's getting ready to make a move. Japan was down, but just slightly. If I look, just anywhere, Asia is pretty strong. Now, if you go look at Europe, PMIs were bad. Remember, France failed yesterday, over, back, under. What does it do? It tries to trade down today. Volume expands a little bit, but it comes into this bar, top of that bar, 42.4693, gets into it. What does it do? Goes right back up over it. 42.46 closes 42.34, so it's right there at the highs. It just can't push down. This thing's going to try to push up again tomorrow. If I look at the DAX, which was the strongest one yesterday, the DAX didn't want to give anything up today. It's right back up there hanging at the highs. If I look at the FTSE, a lot of metals in here, that got pulled down, but still, they don't want to give it up. So even overseas is starting to show strength. So, anywhere you look, it's pretty hard to get bearish here. And, and I don't mean bearish in the sense that we think the market's going to go down a dramatic amount, just bearish in the sense that I don't think you're even going to get a pullback. Dollar hanging at the high, nothing wrong with that. That's exactly what you want it to do. You want it to go sideways. That gives the market the opportunity to keep going. Bonds try to push up, they sell them off again. I can't find anything wrong from an equity perspective with the way this market's trading. And so if I give you a synopsis, the synopsis has to be what it has been, but even more strongly. From a technical and a calendar perspective, we should have got it selling sometime this week. Today probably was the best day given the Russell. Didn't happen. There's just no sellers of size out there, folks. That means we're going to push higher. You've got Thanksgiving weekend next week, or I should say Thanksgiving next week. That's going to, that's usually a positive, and given this market, I suspect it is going to be a positive. It's going to be light trading. You're going to see volume start to tail off tomorrow, and you're going to get this slow grind up just like you get at the end of the December. And I suspect that you're going to see, just grind higher. It's the way it looks to me. Okay, so let's pop in. I got a couple of viewer questions. Let's pop in and take those, and then we'll take and look at any other thing that we have time for. So hang on just a second. I didn't actually get these in here, so let me pop them in so we can see the charts. First one is SDRL. And then I want to take some time and look at that one up in Toronto, the robotics that I was talking about last night, because I actually did look at the financials pretty closely so that I could get a feel for what they do or do not show. So here we go. Let's pop in here. SDRL, this is a driller. This is Seadrill. And so the question actually didn't tell me time frame or bullish bearish. When you give me questions about a stock, I would prefer you to give me a time frame and whether you're bullish or bearish on it. It helps me to answer whatever your question really is. So on a short-term basis here, what do we got? We got a low of 2021, and it hasn't been tested yet. Yeah, it has been tested, 2020. So you get under it, back over it. Okay, so that's hanging in it. Let's look at the weekly here. So on the weekly, it hasn't tested. Or has it? 2021, yeah, it has. So, in lighter volume. Okay, so the big push down, that low is 2214 on this time frame. And this low is 2201, so that gives you a good measurement. So oil looks like, as I just showed you with the XLE, we can look at the OIH here in a second, but oil looks like it's going to try to press back up. This is the lower range. The retest regen zone on the daily is here. So what you want to see is you want to see this thing power higher, right, and see some volume expansion. That would tell you the buyers are going to come in finally. Because when I look at this, all I see is a lot of selling, right, everywhere I look. Now that's going to be true of most of the drillers, but to tell you this thing's changing, you want to see a spike in volume and price. Next, you want to see this retest regenerate zone fail. In other words, you don't want to see it regenerate lower. You want to see it come up here, test this top, come back down, right, to this area, test into this bar, and be unable to break down and then actually break out above it. That tells you that this long-term trend that you've seen here, and this thing's been going on for a long time, this long-term trend is over. And, well, not over, but it's a range trade now. Instead of, it's going to be something this way instead of that way. And so what I would be looking for is that scenario to tell me that. If you get something like this, that gives you a pretty good indication that that's probably what's going to happen. Then you try to buy the dip, but you want to make it prove itself first. And right now you don't have any of that proof. The proof is some sort of buying interest and then a push back into the swing point low that doesn't break back down and then eventually starts to break higher. That gives you a pretty good indication that you're going to get what you need. And this one actually set up nice in that there's a swing point high sitting here. So when you have all that together, that gives you a pretty good indication, right? If you can get over, if you can test this and test it with more volume than you see here, right, then the next push-up is probably going to get over it. And that's what you want to see. So if you want to get bullish, that's what you want. If you're trying to get bearish, I think you're a little bit late. My suspicion is you want to buy it. So let me look quickly here and see what the OIH looks like. Because this trades in the OIH. And yeah, this one's trying. It's trying. It's not ideal, but it's trying. So I think that you know, you got something potentially going on there. Let's switch over to TITXF, which is Titan. And Titan actually did exactly what you wanted. I talked about it last night. I said you want to get over this bar by the end of the week. It looks like it's got a good chance of doing that. Now the thing you don't like is all this volume. But what's good about the way it's behaving is it's not a total breakdown, at least not on this time frame. So you've got this huge range here now, right, which set up another range underneath of which volume exists. So the key price point is going to be here. That's the battleground, and it's over it. And as long as it stays over it, especially if it can push back up and test here in the next week or two, or sometime in the near future, and then come back down and hold this area, that gives you some good indication that this was just a washout move. All of this was a washout move off of earnings, a place, because I mean, we don't trade huge volume here. I mean, let's look at the numbers. You're trading on average 168,000, 155, right? It's light volume. Now you get this kind of a push down, volume expands. What is that probably? Well, it's probably just wiping out a bunch of the holders that can't stay with it. Maybe you have a situation where people are on margin and you blow out the margin. I don't know how much of that took place here, but when I see price like this, yesterday was a takeaway bar, that's a great sign, and then today you get follow through off that takeaway. That gives me some expectation that they were just blowing out people here, and that's good. I mean, that's certainly better than that not being the case. Now, let's quickly, while I'm still here, let's talk about the weekly and then talk about the financials. The weekly push down, it pushed down with volume, right? More volume than you wanted to see. That's a negative. The fact that it gets under back over with more volume is also a negative. So I think that you could see this, 126 area tested again technically. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it come all the way back down here and test the bottom of that area I was just talking about. If it holds it, that's good. Now, the fact that it has this big volume bar on the weekly says that at some point in the future that could get tested again. That's the dollar. That's a long way down. So if I'm a trader, right, or even if I'm an investor, I want to probably think about selling some out here with the expectation of averaging in down here again. And that's my personal view. And I did buy some of this as a full disclosure here. So I'm actually an investor in it myself now. I do believe in the company. That leads me to the fundamentals, and the fundamentals are good. They've got about, if I don't have the numbers in front of me here, but they've got something like 36 million on cash. They're earning interest on that at the rate of something like, I think it was like, well, the numbers over the next year and a half are not going to be that big on what they're earning. They have no other income other than interest off the cash. On the flip side of it, their expectations in terms of their plans, it's going to be about a 40 million run rate to get this thing to market and production. So that means they're going to fall a little bit short unless they can get there cheaper than they expect, or they can do another round of financing. Now, if they do another round of financing, you're probably going to have dilution of shares, and you're going to lose on that. So if they do another, if they do another round of financing, the existing shareholders are going to have their shares diluted. That's a negative. And so what you really want to see is you want to see them hit their milestones, and they have a number of milestones over the next couple of years. Hit those milestones and see that run rate on the cash drawdown less than they expect, and they lay that out pretty well, so you can actually measure up against those earnings reports that they put out, and you can see if that run rate is better or worse. If it becomes worse, you're going to see the stock take a hit. This is just like, and I alluded to it last night, this is like an exploration company, right, in oil and gas or something, or gold or whatever. They're building out what they need to do to make money. They may or may not strike gold, so to speak. In other words, they may get farther down the road here and find out that they have a major issue and that they're not going to receive FDA approval, or they're not going to get through the regulatory hoops that they need to. What that means to me is any money you put in this stock could be totally lost, and you have to view it that way. So I'm not recommending anyone buy this unless they have money to burn. On the flip side of it, if you look at something like SURG, which is Intuitive Surgical, it's not SU, it's ISRG, I believe, if I can remember correctly. Let's see if I remember it. Yeah, they're selling at 514. And if you take this thing back far enough, you'll see that it was a lot cheaper than 514. Even recently, it was 246. It's doubled. There's a lot of money to be made if you're right. And they're basically in the same space and with a different type of product, so it's not a direct competitor. But still, same sort of idea. The other question for me was to actually look at this on the Toronto exchange. That they moved from the venture capital exchange to the Toronto, the TSX, and so the volume characteristics here are actually a little bit better, and that was an interesting take in what this member asked me to give my take on. The problem with it is, even though you had lower volume on the second day down, or the big push down here, you still undercut it with more volume. Well, let me say it differently. You undercut it with less volume, but you stayed under that low, so that becomes a high volume low. Had it gotten back above it, it would have been a little bit of a different story. And I think that, and I know this member knows me, I think that you want to view the technicals from the TMD.TO, right, from the Toronto exchange, versus those from the pink sheets, basically, is where it's trading in the U.S. So it's a good point. You always want to go to the source. This is your source. This is the better read. Unfortunately, it doesn't remove those negatives that I talked about. So those negatives are still there. As far as, why are they different? Well, it could be different for a number of things. Now, if we go to the weekly, you may actually see the weekly turn out better, which would be a huge positive. It's 2.8 now. It's doing 2.7 already. Looks to me like it's probably going to end up with more. But here, the key is, if you come over and look at this bar, that's 3.5. You're not going to do 3.5. That's a huge difference in the charts. And it's why I believe this member asked me to take a look at this. Knowing me, he knows that the source is better. I should have picked up on that myself, and I didn't. Good point. Well received point, and is what made me invest in this. So I think that what you're seeing here was a washout on the weekly chart. It's not going to do as much volume. This is a great tell. It suggests to me that you've got a range trade for now, but longer term, this thing still looks like it's on track. So that's my read of the technicals, both on Toronto and in the U.S., and of course on the fundamentals. I think it's solid still. Hopefully, if you're invested in this, you stayed with it. I like the way it looks. Folks, as always, I appreciate you asking questions, joining in and participating, and I appreciate you being there. You tell a friend, tell two. I'm LA. This is and it was your daily NeoTA wrap. Have yourself a great night. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Good night, folks.